Seltzer Time, meatballs!
What's up, you guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Seltzer Time podcast. It's your boy Ricky, a.k.a. Dick Chuck, a.k.a. the man behind the can. That's Seltzer Time Official. Here is always with my conversation accomplice, man with the hunch about Worcester, Traps.
What is cracking, Fizzle Fiends? Welcome back to another episode of the Seltzer Time podcast. And as always, we are so glad you're with us. Yeah, I messed it up. I couldn't tell that if I got seltzer on the camera or just on my laptop screen. So I had to...
See, it's not as easy as people think, you know?
Yeah, it's hard to see the same thing week after week after week. This week on the show, we have Evan Pierri, host of Notes from the Road, a podcast all about touring life. We talk about what life on the road really looks like, his history, how he started with our local homies 4 years strong.
Yeah, that was super. It's super fun. I was really excited about this interview, mostly because it's a podcast that I genuinely look forward to listening to. So to have a fellow podcaster on, it was a good time. I was excited.
Yeah, and I mean, off record, we got to catch up about the industry, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, no, it was great. I could nerd out aside from listening to podcasts about the behind the scenes issues, or not issues, but behind the scenes stories of touring. Actually getting to be a part of the conversation is super fun.
Yeah, but before we get there, you know what we have to do. Hey, Ricky, how was your week?
My week was good and stressful. So we officially moved
in
out
a different setting.
Yeah, I'm hanging out in Naomi's family room. So maybe and Larry maybe's on the bed. I don't know where Larry is, but for a couple of days, we are living in the family room with her parents, which is great. They're the best people ever. And we have kind of just moved in and made a makeshift loft apartment in this giant room. So it's good though. Moving was fun and I wasn't stressed out at all until we moved a lot of our stuff last Sunday, and then we moved the rest of our stuff. Shout out Joey and Mike D on Thursday. I wasn't really stressed out until Thursday morning, and it was mostly just it wasn't really stress. It was more of okay, we're actually not going to be in this apartment anymore after tonight. It's only a week max that we're not in our new spot, but it's still kind of how is life going to work when you're kind of just moving around? I don't know. It's been kind of wild, but it's been great. So far, it's been awesome. The cats don't let us sleep, so that's fun. We thought it was going to be super cute, and we were like, yeah, you guys have to hang out with us now. It's like a giant slumber party every night. And then we realized that the reason why they don't hang out with us normally at night is because they're acting a fool in the rest of the apartment. And now that we're in one room, they are acting a fool in this room. So I have not slept in 3 days.
Oh, buddy.
But it's okay. It could be worse. They're really cute during the day because they're just super snuggly and you'll see. I think they both. I don't even know if we were recording when they walked through the camera, but they're both around. But yeah. Other than that, just been watching hockey and hanging out.
Hell yeah, man. Yeah.
How was your...
About the same. Hunchback has been crazy busy since I got back from the Cape.
Yeah.
Don't know why, but I'm all about it. A lot of my projects went off a hold, which is super cool. Super cool to see. Is digging back in and figuring out how to make shit work. And then I got to spend time with my sister this weekend. And yeah, my sister is 2 years younger than me, and we're pretty close. And I don't know, it was awesome actually to spend some time with her. She came up, did a little hang out in the backyard, and it's a good time. She actually got to meet Caitlin. Caitlin, our friend Caitlin. Yeah. Which is awesome because Shelby, my sister, and Caitlin have very similar personalities.
Okay.
So my real sister got to meet my Worcester sister, which is pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so it was a good time. But and then last week we had on Claudia Snell, founder of Women Work, sorry. And that was a really cool episode. If people haven't checked that out, got a lot of great feedback this week.
Yeah, she's doing some really great stuff. It's cool to see. The DMs were great to hear from everybody who was excited about that. It's awesome that there is another platform dedicated to, her using her own quote, the badass woman of Worcester. So it was cool to hear what she was doing with the blog and the Instagram and the Twitter, and just super active, which is great. It's cool. It was fun.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, Claudia was great. It was interesting hearing her story. I know her outside of this, so I already knew some parts of her story, but she filled in some gaps, and we wish her best of luck. We're all about anybody that's willing to lift up local voices.
For sure.
So
cool. Want to dive into it?
Yeah, without wasting any more time, here's us.
All right, you guys, what's up? This week on the podcast, we have Evan Pierri of Notes from the Road podcast. What's up, man?
Hey, guys. Stoked to be here. I'm excited to have a conversation a little bit about Worcester, sort of where I got my start in touring, and talk about touring and coffee and some of our mutual friends. And, excited to be here.
Cool. So you're in Nashville at the moment?
Nashville now, the hotbed of COVID insanity. I don't leave my house much for fear of tourists who are still coming here to party, which is terrifying.
Nightmare.
Nashville's been home for the greater part of 5 years now, and it was a really cool move, and it's been a rapidly growing city. Most people know it as the music city, and that traditionally country music city, but it's expanded pretty, incredibly over the time that I've been here, with so many like friends from different genres, and then even a weird explosion of alternative emo kids that ended up here. So like there's a weird pack of us, and it's been really cool to kind of see the growth of that as well. And some of those people like delve into country music or write country songs now, or playing country bands. And it's a pretty thriving, like young city, and it's still affordable for the most part. So that was sort of why I ended up here.
Where did you move there from?
New Jersey originally. And so it's funny. I'll jump straight in. My Worcester experience started 13 years ago. I worked for 4 Year Strong in the earlier part of their touring career. So they had been a band for years locally, especially in Worcester. And I worked at a music management company called Crush. After my senior year of college, I was an intern there. And Rob Hitt, who used to play in the band Midtown, was a manager there, and he was also ran the first label that 4 Year ever put their records out on. And I interned in New York City in the summer of 2007, and technically the person that found 4 Year, that like looked through all the submissions or was always scouring the internet, was this girl named Gabby. And we became friends because she was sort of Rob's intern, and had a pretty great relationship with the 4 Year guys. Like they really liked her. She's one of the best people. She still works for Crush to this day, and she moved out to LA recently, and they have like a sign in front of their office. They're like a digital sign, and they always put like the best Gabby content. It just says like Gabby rules most of the time on it. Yeah. And so Gabby was really the one that put the good word in for me with the 4 Year guys. And it's a crazy experience to think about, being like sort of fresh out of college. And I studied business. I have a degree in entrepreneurial studies. And my goal was always to open a small business someday. But while I was in college, I got really intrigued with the road life. I had hung with friends that were in bands locally as a kid, and they let me just be a little turd kid and take photos and run websites. And so I saw sort of this little peek into the behind the scenes of knowing a local band who opens for touring acts, and getting to see that from time to time, and going, what do these other people do? So like the band is the band, they're on stage, that's why everybody's here. But like, who are these other idiot guys up here in between bands or at the end of the night? And my interest peaked more in college. I got involved with my student entertainment board at my school. And then so we booked big shows, and I sort of got another peek behind that in terms of like production and setting everything up and, putting up a stage and sound and lights and a contract and like what goes into all that. And
sorry to interrupt, but did you do NACA?
I went one year. Actually, my favorite NACA of all time, Boston, Massachusetts. There was one in Boston in probably 2005 or 6.
Did you go to the one in Minneapolis?
No, that was the furthest one I ever made it to. We had a more regional one in like PA that I went to one time.
There's a very good chance we were at these events at the same time. You said student entertainment board, and I'm like, holy shit, I did that. And then running dates, we graduated around the same time.
What year? Yeah,
I loved NACA. Like what they were able to show me about the industry, what they were able to like talk about. You talk about music industry, right? And like there's so much more to the music industry than the bands. That's fascinating.
I think it's a great foundation because it gives young kids who really don't get it it's a peak. Like it's still, the term people like front of house. And when I was 20, I'd be like, yeah. And now it's like, that's my livelihood. But like, I just like, they're like, take it to front of house. And I'm like, And I just kept being like, where am I going?
Where the hell is that?
And wander around the club until you figure it out.
Well, or, in our school, like they would say like, oh, the person's at front of house. And I'd be like,
I don't know. This is our gym. There's no front of house.
Yeah. So for me, just like, it was a peek into that. So yeah, we did my favorite one. So speaking of NACA, my favorite one, we went to Boston. It was the first time I was ever in Massachusetts in my life. And I don't know, we just had a great time. And that city just felt cool to me, I can't even remember where we were, like where it would have been. It would have been like the convention center or something there.
Yeah, I don't.
Near Copley. It was definitely like near Copley. I know that.
Yeah. Like Bayside Expo Center or something like that, maybe?
It was probably where it was. Yeah. I just remember we drank at a place called the Poor House, and I always thought that was funny.
So you came to Boston, you got a love for the industry.
Yeah. That was sort of a foray into it, and booked shows in college. And then sort of all I wanted to do when I got out was find a way in, whatever that way was. And oddly enough, one of my like pretty close college friends, her older sister was working at Crush already. And she was like, yeah, I'll talk to her. And I went and met her at a show one time and just like shot the shit with her. And I was still like a dumb 20-year-old kid. I knew nothing. And it was so funny. I'm sure she laughed. The entire conversation internally was like laughing. And they had me come in for an interview, and years later, like after I was touring and had been out for a while, I like, because they were a Crush band after that, I remember running into her and she was like, oh, like you were the only intern. Like we just brought you in because we wanted to fuck with you. Like there was no other person.
There were no other candidates.
Yeah.
That's
awesome.
awesome.
Like we just, cause I was like, I went to business school. So I showed up like a clown in like
a suit
or just like a sports coat, which was like, I wore those anyway, like a Tool in 2005. But, and I don't say that I love sports coats, but mine was like, it looked stupid. Like I look back at college photos of myself and I looked stupid. But like, yeah. And it was, they were like, oh, everything's so cool. Like I remember the dude that was the GM of Crush at the time, his name was Doug. And he just came in, you're in business school, you're trained to, everything's very refined and specific, and they're going to ask you life goal questions or, whatever. And he was like, what's up, man? How's it going? And I was just like, my like business brain exploded. Yeah, it exploded. And then that was my intro to like, this is the music industry. There's like no formality, like entertainment. No. Yeah. So, and that was it. And then, so I met Gabby. I befriended Gabby, and she sort of just put a good word in with those guys. And, she knew I would work hard. I had no idea what I was doing. But they basically were like, they need somebody that's not one of their friends from home where they're like, hey man, just watch the merch. And then they're like, where? Oh, he's drinking a beer in the corner over there. And all the merch is out and the money's just on the table, And I was like, I think I can do that. I think I can I'm responsible enough to handle that. And got in touch with Alan and Dan, and they were like, okay, show up here. We're going to start a tour or something here. And like my parents drove me, and I was just being like a cool guy in 22, being like, just please leave me here. They're gonna show up. I'm fine. And my parents are like, we're not leaving until we meet these kids. Like, we're not just going to leave you. And it was in like Pennsylvania somewhere. They're like, we're not just going to leave you here. And classic them, pre-tour manager, pre-adult dad, they were hours late, like 3 hours late for whatever time I was supposed to show up for. And of course we were early because that's just how my family raised me. But they were like hours. Like, I think they like made it there just in enough time to play the show. And that was like very 4 Year Strong, 2007. And yeah, and off I went on an adventure, you know, and that's the gist of that. But I just wanted to shout out all those dudes, Dan, Alan, Joe Weiss, Jake, and then of course Josh. I know he has not been in the band forever, but that's my guy. And he's still a Worcester guy. So like,
he's the best.
Yeah. So I love all those dudes. And that was my like fall 2007 was the first time I had ever been to Worcester, Massachusetts, the second biggest city in Massachusetts, you know?
Thank you for New England. Thank you for recognizing us.
Yeah. I knew that. Like, that was always their thing. They're like, yeah, man, like Boston's the biggest, but we're the second biggest. They're like,
right there.
Yeah.
Saw Joe this morning and got a coffee. He said you were their first legitimate tour manager. That's what.
I will happily accept that. There was a intermediate person that they had befriended on tour, and his name was Pete. And I was still out there. Like, I'd been out there, and I was just like, I got brought in to just do whatever. So like, I was selling merch and just like helping the hustle, but I wasn't calling myself a tour manager at that point. And they're like, oh, Pete's going to come out. And I was just like, who's this fucking clown? You know, and he had experience, but he was like, and I'm sure he'll never see this. And the 4 Year dudes, if they hear it, will at least laugh at my commentary. But he was like, smoked weed all the time and like did nonsense. And I love him. And he's a character, and he's a true like Canadian character, the nicest guy you could ever meet. But I was just like, what is this dude? And it was just, after a while, they were like, we think you can handle this. We think we've like seen that you're responsible. Like, we'll give you a chance to like figure it out and see how this goes. And like, that's it. The rest is history. And I've had in my 12 plus years, like just amazing mentors. That's the whole industry. It's there's no textbook.
Yeah.
Kids that go to Belmont here in Nashville think there's a textbook. There's no textbook. And
yeah. Kids that go to Berkeley and Boston kind of think the same thing too.
I think there's some merit there because they're the ones that are training in an instrument or for voice like that is different. But like, yeah, the music business majors, it's like,
yeah. So when I worked at SJC, I get that question all the time from like Berkeley kids would come out to either pick up drums or just to like tour the factory. And I was the one giving them a tour, and I don't play drums. I can't play an instrument to save my fucking life. So here's these kids who could like play me under the table, and they're like, dude, how do I get a job in the industry? I'm like, dude, I don't know. I just applied as an intern and didn't even get the position I applied to be an intern for. They just needed extra hands. Like, and then I just kind of stayed and built a role that way. Like, it's pretty much how you do it. Meet people.
That was the same. Like at the time, being young and like kids coming to shows that were close in age that would do the same thing. I just said, it's like anything else. If you want to be a lawyer or a doctor, in those cases, you go to school and you continue your education, and you really do have to learn so you don't kill us when we come to you for help or legal advice. But then it's who you know. Like, those kids also have to do internships, and then you do your rounds as a doctor. Like, and then it's like, how much schmoozing did you do? Which I'm not great at, but it's just more like being at the right place, right time is what I've always told people. You know, it's still like any other job out there that could change your life. I didn't really know. I got lucky. I had a friend in college whose older sister worked at Crush, and the rest is history. You know, and then I had to
dress off to get to that interview. And so that's the thing that was always a standout to me. Like, I was in a band for a while and like trying to make it in the music industry. At 20 years old, like that dude Pete you're describing, like that's how, or whatever, the friends, that's how people treated the music industry, is that they thought it was just a fucking game, and then nobody treated it seriously. So I would get in fights with my bandmates because I wanted to treat it seriously and get a bank account and really keep track of merch sales. And they're like, nah, dude, we're going to go play this show and then do some other shit. And it's like, that's always the standout to me. If you want to be young, show up, but treat it fucking serious. Like, they call it an industry. It's music business. It's a business. Yeah, it's fun. Yeah, there's not a lot of rules, but treat it seriously.
And in the case of like the 4-year guys, like bringing in the people to help with what you just described, that's it. Because if you're not great at that or you don't want to do that, you're not supposed to. You're supposed to play shows. You had to get yourself to a point. You had to sell some T-shirts on your own. You had to push your own albums. You had to book these shows and play these halls and play these insane Massachusetts shows, which that was a learning curve for me too. Growing up as a pop punk kid in New Jersey and then seeing these kids where I'm like, people are actually getting hurt in there. What is happening?
So many VFWs.
But then there is this turning point where someone has to manage those things. And you have the home team and you have the road team. And usually the home team and the road team have to communicate and work well, or it all goes sideways. And sometimes they don't. And sometimes it's not fun. And sometimes the road team has to undermine the home team. It's just how it goes. But yeah, it was a life lesson in a lot of things. I think for me, I recently, funnily enough, all these Zoom things are really like, it's so funny now because conversations, interviews you would never had, or experiences or things you could have been invited to where I feel so fortunate to know people from all over the country and world, but like you can never be in the same place, two places at once, if you will. And recently I got invited to speak to some scouts because I also am an Eagle Scout. And just like tell these kids, I took some of the things that I learned through that organization and they've helped me in the career that I chose, and, management of your life and understanding the world and seeing maybe a little bit bigger picture of the world and treating others with respect and being prepared, that's my life.
The first thing I thought of is being prepared on the road. That's the fucking number one, man.
Yeah. So, and like it's dear friends of mine from California. It's one of their older siblings who's a scout leader now. And he's like, but tell them about all the cool stuff. I'm like, no, but I want to tell them about the things that like they think are lame that you learn in scouts, but I use that in my daily life. Like, I think that's more impactful than me telling them how cool it is to work for whoever. But yeah, so it was interesting. Like right off the bat, kind of, I love all those dudes, but hit it off with Dan because Dan was in the scouts. So we had this weird kinship bond thing, and those skills of just being prepared and having the right tools and time management and foresight in some cases to try to look ahead. That's what helped me in the early stages. And then having some great mentors to like usher me along and learn the finer points and understand things. So I didn't look like a complete idiot when it came to settling a show and talking about contracts and, all the other things that go along with that. But yeah, so getting in a van with those guys and then always returning back to Worcester and that whole vibe. And we talked a little off mic about this ahead of time, but I feel like the Worcester of 2020 and the Worcester of 2007 are drastically different Worcesters. So
a little bit.
I just, even those guys were like, after a point, they're like, we want to make it cool. Like we're never going to leave. All of those guys said that from day one. And I went, I respect that. I love New Jersey. It's where I grew up. There's so many fantastic things there, but I was also like, I don't know if I'm going to stay. But those guys they're like, we're dying in Massachusetts. And I was like, great.
Cool. I grew up like 10 minutes outside of Worcester, but I never grew up like going into the city outside of like Ice Cats games and concerts at the Palladium when I got a little older. And then, so my like Worcester experience, it's funny you mentioned 2007. I started working at a Starbucks in Worcester in 2007. And that's like kind of how I fell in love with the city, was by meeting, the millions of people I met through Starbucks. But you kind of like get a feel for like the like city life. And then watching Worcester grow, because even then, like I was still on like the north side of Worcester, which is closer to where I grew up. but then, getting to know people who work in city politics and other band and people in bands and stuff in the city and really falling in love with it. It's funny that they never wanted to leave when I never had any intentions of moving to Worcester. And now I'm like, yo, fuck yeah, this place rules. And we just bought a house in Worcester. It's crazy.
But yeah, just to shout out all the, Joe Weiss bought a building and now has turned it into a collective, a motorcycle shop, and a coffee shop. He said that he straight up said, I bought this building. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but it was cheap because it's Worcester in 2000.
Yeah.
Whenever he bought that building 10 years ago, at least. And he's just, I just did it because I knew the dude, he gave me a deal, and now that building, he knows that building is worth a crazy amount just because of Worcester's, growth. And he did cool shit with it, and he gave our other dear friend, Josh Lovell, who probably cuts everybody we know's hair, a place to start his own business. What a cool
magnet behind me.
Yeah. Again, we talked a little bit about this beforehand, but I'm so bummed I still haven't seen it with my own two eyes. I get to see it through photos and other people sharing stuff about it and talking with those guys every so often. But I want to come get my hair cut and drink a coffee. Those are my favorite things. And
right.
Now my friends have done that. And I feel like those guys were we understand our city isn't cool. And when you're 20, you don't have the ability to, and foresight at that point, but you figure fast forward a decade and they've been part of the cool, even down to Alan starting a Christmas tree thing and taking it to bigger heights, but being I'm going to do this cool thing. And then there's this collective that we're going to be a part of. And all those guys just being involved and kind of perpetuating Worcester into what they want it to be, a cool place. So we don't want to leave. So why don't we make where we live cool? And you're that's the greatest gift, for living in a state that's expensive as fuck, which is where you guys live, finding a way in their town to make it work and have these things that they've traveled all over the world and seen. They're this is so cool. And then they've found ways to bring it to Worcester, which, my expensive degree that I have is that's what I really want to do. And I've just never had the gusto to do it,
I feel you. Also, your Nashville story is my Worcester story, where I'm from Connecticut. I needed to get out of where I lived. I never felt connected there. I stumbled around for a bunch of years around Massachusetts, but found my way to Worcester. My wife and I bought a house here, and I've never felt connected to a city. And I feel like I've come into it at the time when it's building up and there's this already brooding scene, and I get to help a scene that's already been kind of getting up and going, and then learning about all the people that give a shit about this place, because that's really what it takes. It takes people giving a fuck and dedicating themselves to doing it. Like you said, that's the only reason we have the things we have going for us right now, is because there's dudes like Joe who are willing to put the money where their mouth is and invest. I think it's hysterical that you bring up Alan, because I've been just throughout my talks with people, I find that more older local people know Alan as the guy selling trees in Kelly Square than as the lead singer of a world-renowned band, like a world touring band. And that just is hilarious. Where local, I don't know, baby boomers don't know what 4 Years Strong is, but they know the guy that was selling Christmas trees, and he saw that they bought a farm.
And they know the guy that made it homey and cool and little old Worcester, not this, we drove 20 minutes away to get a tree. There's a guy right now down the street, and that's such a cool, and that's Alan. Alan loves Christmas. When I saw that the first year, I was he is in his glory, and now he drives a tractor and they have so much land. And I was just I don't think 20-year-old Alan, when I met him, could see that, but I really love that that's where those guys have landed. And for me, they took time away from music and grew up. I mean, we all that time of life in those years where they did that. We all did. That was transitioning into being 30-ish.
Yes.
And they did it. And it's everything else in music, where even the biggest pop stars, when they're where did they go? Yeah, Justin Bieber, he went and got married, and he took some time off to figure out what it means to be an adult and be a better human. And it's what do you want? There's only so much money, and there's only so much fame, and there's only so much nonsense. But so I was proud of all them to go figure out we can do the band thing on our own terms, and then come home and have these lives. and still have jobs and have things to do and keep ourselves busy. And I don't know, there's something to be said about that, because the music's going to end at some point. It can't go on. It can't go on in perpetuity. It just can't. And
unless you're the Rolling Stones.
Right.
The only band that can continue to do it forever without taking a break.
The Jimmy Fallon moment in Almost Famous gets funnier and funnier and funnier every year.
It's true.
Yeah,
you know, like that movie came out 20 years ago, and that joke was funny 20 years ago in real time, and now it's 20 years later and it's funnier. So but all right, I'm gonna crack this, because I didn't crack it. This podcast is about.
There it is.
What are you sipping on?
I love that Trader Joe's private label.
Respect.
Honestly, for me, it's just like I'm always at Trader Joe's, and there's so many better seltzers. I'm not going to deny that. I'm not going to try to say this is the best, because it's not. It's just fine.
Yeah.
But I'm just always down that aisle, and I get the bottles too, because I feel like, I guess the more you realize, like, cans are more recyclable than other things. So like sometimes I don't feel as bad, because I feel like these are still able to be recycled better than bottle. I don't know. It's the whole plastic debate.
Never drink seltzer out of a bottle. It's like, I mean, now it would it's like, first of all, I very rarely can drink a seltzer without having to record it to put it on the internet, but which is like my own fault. But the bottle, for some reason, the bottle just like doesn't taste right to me. Like I don't know if it is because there's too much in a bottle, because the bottle's always like 1 liter or whatever. And I think it just gets flat and warm too quick. And it's just, it's not the same deal. I don't know what it is.
I try to do the bottle like I would soda when I was like, I'll open it, pour a glass, put it away. But still, you're right. I totally agree. Like you're getting the fresh out of the can. Like this is one serving size. It stays pretty sparkly, pretty seltzery. Also, have you two, real quick, because you're in the capital of Polar, you guys live in it.
Yes.
Is that a publicly traded company that I should be buying stock in right now? Or wish I did 5 years ago, when it was probably 12 cents, and it's at least come up since then.
Yeah.
I don't think they're public. I think they're private still.
I think they're private too. Yeah, it's like one.
It just worked out a deal with Dr. Pepper, though.
Interesting.
Sorry.
Yeah, so you'll be able to get it nationally.
Okay, that's good to know.
I think so. What I've been told is you can already get it nationally at CVS. Like every CVS in the country has Polar in some capacity, but I've never had to travel to find it. It's like literally everywhere around here. So
I just love that the like Northeast. That's the Northeast. Like will live and die by that. And like I feel like in the LaCroix boom, everybody's like, "Fuck LaCroix. We've had this forever." I imagine their profits skyrocket in the like this wake of sparkling water and seltzer being the thing right now. Like they've banked so much.
Well, there's a reason why Coca-Cola started their own brand, which is AHA. There's a reason why Pepsi started it, which is bubbly. Like everybody's in the game. It's cheaper than manufacturing soda.
Yeah.
Less ingredients.
Yes. Yeah, literally less.
Here's my hot take on bubbly. The cherry flavor, right? That cherry flavor wins by far, because all these other companies have had to, like, aside from Coke and Pepsi, like have had to like go like, all right, we got to adapt to these flavors. We have to rework all this. And they just went, yeah, cherry Pepsi, just dump that flavor in seltzer. And you're like, yeah. And you go like, this gives me my like weird fixation. Like I'm drinking a cherry Pepsi with no bullshit in it. And it's like, that one's my favorite of the bubbly. Like if there's other flavors, I'm like, these are all fine, but that's the best.
Bubbly, a little like the yo and the like high written on the tab. That's my favorite thing in all of seltzer marketing. I personally think seltzer marketing is garbage. That's the only thing that I think is like kind of a game changer.
I feel like they let someone's kid run that division, and that's why yeah. Like there's no way old 70-year-old executives at Pepsi figured that out. They were like, okay, the seltzer thing is this young weird, like get the weird intern to come up with this, and that's probably what happened. Who knows?
Yeah.
They're probably good at marketing. The same people that did the Monster cans by putting the little M on all the Monster cans. I loved that. And that's, everybody's talking, like, these guys are going way beyond just releasing product. They're all trying to like create lifestyles around their product. So like the bubbly lifestyle is now, I'm doing air quotes way too much this fucking episode, is now this whole big thing where, they're trying to do what LaCroix is already doing. But I don't know. LaCroix is owned by Juggalos, so.
Who are they owned by? It's not owned by Faygo.
They're owned by the same company that owns Faygo.
Yes, that rules. That makes me want to support it a little bit more right now.
That makes me want to kick it off the stage into a group of people.
What if all of a sudden the ICP dudes were like, listen, you know what? We get it. That stuff's always super sticky. It's made a mess, but here's the closest thing. They just start spraying bottles of.
Yo, guys, we're older and we all have diabetes now, so we got to switch to seltzer.
I saw ICP for the first time ever. Like, is it last year? Is it the last year or the year before? One of our friends was opening for them, so we went to the show at the Palladium. For some reason, Worcester has become like Detroit 2 for ICP, where every single year they play at least one show at the Palladium. It sells out. It's like a whole thing. So we had a friend who was in a band that was opening who got us in, and I was like, I can't believe I'm 30 years old going to see ICP. Like, and I've never even liked them, but I was like, I need to see what this is like. So like all the bands played, and then just before ICP, you start seeing these like plastic sheets going up all over the entire Palladium. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And I knew that they sprayed soda, but I didn't know that it was like that big of a deal. The guy so we were standing back kind of near the like sound area, and I was like, hey man, like what's with all the plastic? The guy's like, have you never seen these guys? It's like, nope, never in my life. He's like, you're definitely gonna get hit with a bottle of soda. I was like, I don't know, I'm like pretty far back. He's like, no, trust me. And the entire show, there were bottles like flying past our heads. It was the grossest thing I've ever seen. So if it was seltzer, I'm sure the Palladium would be a lot cleaner after that.
They started having to do all those acts that really like Guar and them, where there's like some form of liquid being shot into the crowd. The venues just got fed. Like they charged them. They'd be like, dude, yep, here's the cleanup fee, and we're going to triple charge you because it's going to be everywhere. And then they just got to the point they're like, we won't put the show on unless you guys bring your own way to like prevent the worst part of it. Like we know we're still going to have to clean some of this, but like, yeah, they all had to start bringing something like that in order to even be allowed to put shows on. So,
but it just makes sense. Like, again, talking about marketing, you're creating a lifestyle and making Guar. There is nothing like a Guar show. And you may not dig Guar's music, but you hear Womb with a View and you see a prosthetic baby getting spun. Like, there's just a certain feeling that happens at a Guar show. They're like, oh my God, this is incredible.
Yeah, taking like metal theatrics to like the next level. Most people go to like, I mean, I'm sure they have their core fans that are there for the whole show, but most people that are going to like see Guar, even like Warped Tour, when they did it, like they had a crowd every day just because people were like, what are they going to do today? Like not necessarily everybody was there to hear it. They were like, what's going to happen?
I saw them at Bamboozle one time, and there was all these like scene girls running away in fear. Like, it was perfect. It was perfect.
They were probably all like on the barrier waiting for the next Screamo band to start. And they were like, we're not leaving our place. They're like, we're about to get shot with a lot of fake blood. So good luck.
I think Parkway Drive was up after them. So I think you're 100% right.
Nailed it.
All right. So that's probably enough about Guar. So you started with 4 Years Strong, but you didn't stop the tour life, right?
No, yeah, it's a thing now. Like, you get older, you look back on things, a decade goes by, and you kind of, regret's a bad word. I'm trying to live my life in a better place these days without regretting things, but more thinking back on, I made a decision, and I went down another path that afforded me all these other things. So like, I think I left the 4-year thing a little premature. And I'm a pretty loyal person, and I'm a creature of habit. And, I think the generation before us, like our parents, like living and staying at the same job for 25 years, like that was the goal. And now like our generation's like, who's paying me the most?
Yeah.
Like I can do the job, and they're not wrong. Like greed's one thing, but like going like, cool, I took this job initially and now like I can get paid what I'm actually worth to jump ship. So they jump ships. Like I have friends from college who have worked for like 6 or 7 companies, and we've only been out of school for, you know, as long as I've been touring, like 13 years. And you're like, that's insane, but not by the modern standard.
Yeah.
And so and it wasn't even that they weren't paying me fair. It was more just like they were about to go on downtime to write a record. And, you know, I've had a few hard conversations with those guys over the years across the board of, you know, working with them and being friends with them. And I remember talking to Dan and just saying like, hey, is there any chance you guys could put me on any kind of a retainer? And what I've learned now in doing this for a little bit longer is like at the highest level of it, like anything else, people will do that. Like we keep our team on so that we don't have to start from scratch again. So we'll pay them something so that they'll just, even if we're off or we're on downtime, we know that as soon as we're ready to go again, they're working in the background. They never stop working. But when you're a small pop punk band, it doesn't exist. And in the timeline of like that era of music, that weird shift from CD sales to streaming or like whatever was coming next, where like nobody was like there was no budget. You know, there just was no budget. And you know, I had a real talk with Dan, and it was hard to say like, well, hey man, like there's this option for me this summer. Like you guys are off, and I know this is or you haven't figured out if you're going to tour this summer. And like I put a resume in, I can go. And it was tough, but like moved on and started working for this band Whitechapel, who they're a metal band from Tennessee. So then funny enough, like going from my first time in Worcester, Massachusetts to getting off a plane in East Tennessee at the tiniest airport I had ever been in my life in Knoxville, and meeting this new group of dudes who play the scariest, gnarliest metal music, but are truly like Southern, nice, amazing kids. And it was like a true, like growing up in the Northeast, we're used to a certain vibe and, you know, way of life and living. And no joke, the day that I got there, they're like, okay, you're going to stay with Gabe, the bass player, at his folks' place. Like they got a room for you, etc. And his parents are the sweetest. And his mom's like, oh yeah, like, you know, Gabe's dad's been out there, you know, smoking meats all day, and he'll probably just sit out there all night. He sat out there all night smoking pork for them to like have a farewell party for the whole band the next day. So like everybody's families came up, but he like didn't go to bed. He just sat out with a smoker.
You're committed to the meat
all night. And I was like, this is new to me. This is new. But they're like they're terrifying. Like the theming, the visuals of that band are like dark, but they're the nicest kids. And it was such a funny juxtaposition.
It's always like that, I feel. Like I knew the Bury Your Dead guys, and I used to work with some of those dudes. If anybody knew how soft the Bury Your Dead guys really were, they would think their music was all a joke. Like they were just some of the nicest, most polite people ever. And it's just like, yeah, you have to.
Yeah. And so that was like, yeah, well, and it's so funny. So like that was my start in with them. They did at the time, Kevin Lyman had jumped into doing a metal tour because Ozfest had come to an end at whatever in the mid 2000s there, like that sort of came to an end. So they started doing the Mayhem tour, and those guys were on not the first year of it, but like, you know, that was still pretty early in Mayhem. But unlike Warped Tour, they were the opener. Like you play at noon every day, like gates open, you guys are the first ones on, you know, that's how new they were at the time a decade ago. And it was great because Warped Tour, doing it all those years, it's such a grind. You don't know when you're playing. It's not a long day, like a true tour day. Like I've done days now where like I start at 7 a.m. and I work till 2 a.m. You know, so Warped Tour is a joke compared to that because you start at 7 a.m. you're done by 5. But like Whitechapel, that first summer, up unloading, like there's only 15 bands, not 500. You know, like so like we were treated better. Same deal, same catering. You know, got a hot shower every day, and they were done at 1. I was like done at 1 o'clock. Like I started my day at 8, and I was done at 1. You know, and the tour like. Tour managing those tours, I still have to coordinate and help the band, but like there's a tour manager. There's someone that's taking care of everything. You just show up, you go down to production, you get a case of water and a case of beer. They feed you every day. Like, that's not my job to coordinate any of that. I just have to get fed. And it's like, it's a learning process, and it's a great one. But like, that summer with them was like one of the best in terms of like, I had more time to myself, like got to know those guys really well. And from there I did 2 years and saw more parts of the world. Like with 4 Year, we did a little bit of UK touring, but then like Whitechapel, like metalheads, Europe is like the metalheads dream, you know, like those kids love metal over there. So like we did crazier, far reaching places in Europe. And, that was like to go from being a pop punk kid to like seeing a Massachusetts hardcore scene where I was like, what is this? To then going like, what is this metal scene about? Like even scarier and funnier shit going on out there. So I did 2 years with those guys. So it was like 2 years was sort of my like becoming my wheelhouse of like making it to a point and then, you know, sort of moving on to the next thing. And again, those dudes are great. Like same with 4 Year. Like I didn't leave. I always left. Like they're my dudes. I love them to death. And they're so funny now because they're like, you're a Tennessee guy now. And I'm like, yeah, it's all because of you guys.
This is your fault.
But yeah. And so from there I did some brand marketing stuff for a while and did some brand marketing tours and like went back on the Warped Tour, not as a, you know, tour manager working for a band, but working for some brands and did some early. It's just a different experience because the tour managing thing, like I just described, like you're sort of working to get to the set. And then once the set's done, the day slows down and you like pack everything up and then you can take a break and not feel like you're dying in 100-degree heat in Arizona. And the brand side is, you know, you're out there all day with the kids. Like you're up first still. And then your day, as soon as the gates open, your day starts. It's not like, oh, we might have a 2:00 set. It's like, okay, as soon as the kids are running in, like you're on and you're working in the heat with all the kids. And it's rewarding and it's different vibe. And you're reporting back to like, I had real bosses and like real corporate America stuff to report back in on every night. It wasn't like, okay, the show's done and I'm just going to bed. It was like, all right, I have to send a report in and photos and, you know, all this stuff, which I love that and hate that. I loved it and hated it. It's more about the people. That tour is just it was such a networking opportunity.
Yeah.
Because there are 500 plus people there. So aside from making friends and like lifelong friends and people meeting their future spouse, which has happened tenfold out there. It just is like, there's never a tour like that where you get to like mingle with that many people and maybe that leads to something else in life and just a different experience. But like the person that I worked for a while, I worked for this marketing company called Filter. They're now defunct. They also had a magazine for a while. It was like an indie scene magazine, which was cool. And they had all these clients, like they had anywhere from like Toyota. So like big, you know, huge worldwide brand recognition, down to the clients like Macy's, where Macy's had like a millennial brand. And that's what we were pushing on Warped Tour. And, the person that I worked with the longest out there on a lot of that stuff was this girl, Lauren Miller. And she is like, I feel like women always hate when you have a girlfriend or wife and you're like, they're like my sister. And they're like, I'm going to kill this girl. And but like she is more like my sibling where like we'd be sitting in the heat and she'd be like, drink water. And I'm like, you drink water, like it's not like we were ever in love or like trying to be more than that. We were just like, it'd be like you were 12 and you want to kill your little sister. Yeah. But they're also going to look out for you and save your life at some point. So like, that's Lauren and I's relationship. We're like deep friends. We in the trenches, day to day, care about each other, making sure we were eating, surviving, caffeinated.
Yeah. Well, because if you go down, she has to do your work and she can't do that.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know if we ever thought about it that way. It was just more like, we gotta survive this thing together. And she now works for Billie Eilish. So if there's a trajectory for you, there's one.
Not a gig.
What?
Not a bad gig.
Yeah. comes out of punk rock. She's like the most cool, down to earth, smart. Like she went to school for psychology. She's very, very like, she reads people really well. But she's done it all. She stayed out there a few more years in that like sponsorship world, and she got with some of the bigger ones and did really well for herself. But also it's a burnout. It's different working for an artist than it is doing that stuff because it's corporate. And it's funny enough, in that off mic thing where I was telling you, we did the trivia thing the other night when Kevin was asking some questions to this group of people via video chat or via phone in video. He was like, everybody thinks the Warped Tour always made all this money, but there were only a few key years where we really did turn a profit. And, you know, I laughed a little bit at that, where I was like, dude, you had like Nintendo as a sponsor one year. And he said the biggest years were the two that he named. It was like, they had some pretty keynote sponsors, like 05 for Warped Tour was like Target was the presenting sponsor.
Yeah.
That was the height of like, you know, it sort of came all the way up to 2005. And then it sort of, you know, it had a couple of like resurges past 2005, but 2005 was the height of Fall Out Boy and My Chemical Romance. And like, all those bands were like on TRL. Like that's what I remember about that
TRL again. We've been talking about TRL all week. Sorry.
Yeah, I remember going to that. I only went to 2 Warped Tours that I didn't work, and it was 04 and 05. And the 05 one, I just remember being there. I was like 17-ish, I think, 17 or 18 at that point. And I just remember looking around, being like, "What the fuck is going on?" They were just like children all around me. Not that I was, you know, an adult at 17, but like coming from going to shows at the Palladium every single weekend, and that 04 Warped Tour was very much kids who like went to the Palladium every weekend. And then you go to this 05 show and there's like, you know, mall kids all over the place. That was like such a shock to me as a kid. And then getting older and like kind of nerding out and reading more about like the history of the Warped Tour and hearing how that year was the kind of like the pinnacle in terms of like where they made money. It's not surprising at all.
And I mean, he said that, and I knew when he was like, yeah, there were 2 years. And I was like, if he doesn't say 2005, he is a liar.
Yeah.
But he did. And it was a year where that was like, I feel like even at 20, which is how old I was then, I was like, he definitely, like, Kevin, I love you. I'll just say it like this. You always treated me well. I know I was one of thousands of faces, but like also it was like Target presents the Warped Tour that year. So like, yeah.
You got money on that. Like,
I hope so.
You only have yourself to blame.
Yeah, I hope so. Anyway, so did a few years of...
We're about 45 minutes into this thing, and we haven't even talked about why we brought you on to begin with, which is your podcast.
I mean, I got all the time in the world. How, like, what are we looking at time-wise here? I could talk for 2 hours if you want,
we could an hour and a half for each episode, but fuck it.
Great.
Keep going. Whatever you feel like talking about.
Well, I'll circle it. So did a few more years doing sort of, I stayed on the Warped Tour doing from a brand aspect. And then from there, I worked for that same brand marketing company for a year or so in LA and worked on an account for Spotify, which was like Spotify is a jump off point in the States. And it was cool. It was interesting to see that. And that's blown up into, they're the biggest music streaming source in the world right now. It's worth like, they're like a $12 billion company or some absurd. I just saw a stat the other day where I was like, stop paying artists nothing. Like, you guys can pay them a little bit more. Come on.
A little bit.
Everybody should renegotiate that. Like all the music, like all the labels should renegotiate this. Anyway. And then found myself coming back from LA because it was, I feel like the Northeast has a speed, like New York City and Boston have like speeds that are quicker than suburbs, you know, like the people and jobs and information and like expectations work pretty quick, you know, so like New Jersey has a speed, but LA is just, it's a lot, you know, it's a different lifestyle out there for me. I'm, you know, I don't want to speak so broad, but so I came back. It took a toll on me literally from a physical sense. And I think I finally understood what real anxiety is, because it happened, and like anxiety attacks and, you know, that type of thing, which when you're a kid, you don't, like 20 something years old, you don't understand what that is. And so the more I've like peeled back layers of that in my life, that's always a part of it now. Like regardless of what I'm doing, I try to keep a good tab on my mental health. And I think that can be said to anybody in whatever you do. If you're listening to this, you know, sometimes you got to take one small step back and take a deep breath, or the world's going to crush you. I know it's hard to say in 2020 when we're all sort of in that state of, you know, this pandemic has probably really been hard on a lot of people, myself included. I think we're all entitled to a day where you want to just scream in a pillow because who the fuck knows what's happening next. But that made me, like, coming back from that job and seeing like how that world worked made me realize that maybe that wasn't for me, and that just speed of things. So I went back to Jersey for a bit and worked locally. There's a venue down there called Starland, which was sort of one of my home venues growing up, and got to see it from that aspect. Worked for a promoter there for a while and sort of jumped back in from that angle, and got to welcome some of my friends to like my home venue. So it was weird because, you know, after touring for a while, like being this person standing still, but I don't know, it kept me involved and could just like have, you know, these relationships with people on like a holy shit, what are you doing here? And you're like, I'm here working. Let's, you know, like I can show you New Jersey now. Like I can be a representative of my state. But I hit a point where I was like, I think I'm gonna go to Nashville. It had been on my radar for a while. A lot of friends had started to come here because it was a growing city. It was reasonably affordable for a while. And there's jobs here for music stuff. Like there just are, you know, I know it's known for country music, but it's really taken off in the last couple of years in terms of all genres represented, and a lot of like old emo kids coming here and becoming country writers. Because if you can write a pop song, you know, like pop rock, pop emo song, you can write a country song, you know,
to a bunch of different types of melodies.
Yeah. And so that was a huge jump. And for me, I just came with no intention of necessarily going on tour. I just came to like come find a change and be with friends and not have to start completely over, like move to a city where you don't know anybody. And it's just, you're ingrained in people. And so I'd been here for maybe 2 months, and a friend on a Friday night called me and was like, what are you doing tomorrow? And I said, nothing, you know that. She's like, cool. Some like another manager in our management group needs a merch guy to go out with this band, but they have a bus call at 5 a.m. You in or out? And I was like, I mean, why would I be out? You know, I don't have work right now. And off I went. And to bring the Scout thing full circle, day one of this artist that I'm not familiar with, I sort of know a couple of the people out there because they've played in bands that I had known. And I'm on the floor dealing with all this merch that is kind of a mess because, again, the last person left it in disarray. And the tour manager comes over to me, and he could just see like I was doing something in a methodical manner in a certain way. And he just, I don't know how he said it, but you know, I don't know how it came up, but I was like, yeah, blah, blah, I'm an Eagle Scout. He's like, I knew it. And he was like, and he was one too. So that was for Dan and Shay. So I started working for this country duo, Dan and Shay. Now multi-Grammy winning, you know, mega stars, which is so cool to see as well. But yeah, their original tour manager was also an Eagle Scout. It's like this weird, like, you know, if you can manage a bunch of kids and not kill them all at a summer camp, you can manage a bunch of, you know, musicians as well. And so, yeah, I worked for those guys for, again, it was like a 2 year, like 2 years is my 2 years is sort of my like meter of working for an artist. And yeah, they were in that whole time I was with them, they were on the rise. You know, they jumped between 2 records and won a Grammy and, you know, playing bigger and bigger shows. And for me, that was like another learning curve of like going on a full amphitheater tour and doing some arenas and getting to see what that life was like. And I really wanted to take a back seat. I like that. That's when I feel like I became a true professional merchandise manager, like where you learn the finer points of that. It's not just counting t-shirts. There's a lot more to it it can be at times. And you got to see like an arena level and how that worked.
That's a supply chain issue. Like you have to understand how many sizes you need to know Yeah, no, I'm with you. That's way more than just.
And in their case, like they're with Warner Music, so they have a 360 deal, which is what Warner started doing. So Warner has a whole division where they just manage merchandise now too. Like forever, they had outsourced it to whoever the artist wanted to go with, but now they have a whole internal team, which is nice, and they're great at that because they have a team. You know, it's not just like, oh, you're dealing with a merch company who's worried about them, and you're trying to keep tabs on your own supply. They're also watching the back end too to know when the point would be to like drop ship more or print more. And it was another learning curve, so like coming to Nashville, seeing how country music operates, which is a genre I did not care about growing up.
I didn't get into country music until probably like I graduated high school in 2006. And I think that summer is the first year I ever went to a country show. And it was super awkward because I went like dressed the same as I've always been. So I showed up to like Gillette Stadium for a Kenny Chesney show in like cut off Dickies or something in Vans. And I was like, what's up? This is awesome. And I like loved it. But all the kids I was with, I stood out very, very much so. And I was like, this is kind of wild. And then over the years, I've kind of fallen out of a lot of that type of music. But it was such a different world to see a show like that where like growing up, you think of country music and I always thought of like Johnny Cash or like, you know what I mean? More of that classic country sound. And then you go see this show and there's like pyro and people are like swinging on shit. I'm like, what am I watching right now? It was nuts.
He was sort of not the pioneer because Garth really ushered in.
But for the country music of like that you and I would know, it would be, he was definitely the pioneer of being in a stadium and like.
Yeah. So like him and Garth ushered in the 90s, this like bigger than life persona in country music and taking the production up to a level that there's some pop artists that don't even go that big. But so interesting to like get fully ingrained in a town that's as much as there's diversity here now more in music, it's still country driven.
Yeah.
And to see two dudes on the rise that were doing it the right way, that had a label behind them and navigating this shot, and it's super interesting because even Dan and Shay sort of came out of the Pittsburgh scene. He's another scene kid. And
really?
It's funny. He talks about it sometimes, but it's interesting now. I think he wavers on it, but it's like, yeah, he came out of that scene and it's cool to see like you turn a corner, like a good song is a good song.
Yeah.
But how can you get that song in front of more people and ears? And country music is way bigger in America than emo music would ever be. And they've found this really great balance of doing it. And Shay is a beyond phenomenal singer. And Dan really is also behind the scenes, like doing all the arrangements and stuff. So like, it's funny, you found out a good working team and they've proven that they're able to crush it at that. And again, they're just another, like the same with the 4 Year and the Whitechapel guys. You're like, anytime they like continued on in success for me, I've just been so happy to see and proud and just go like, I love it. Like finding your own path in it and just seeing people have success, whether I was a part of it or not. It's like, those are my guys, like all of them. And then from there, I tried to quit touring, which, it didn't work. I tried, I think I did it for maybe not the right reasons, like trying to find the balance of a relationship in touring is hard. A little bit easier for an artist because they can bring their significant other with them along for the ride. But when you're just working, that's not a thing that's afforded to you. So for 12 plus years, it would be meeting someone and then saying like, okay, I'll see you in 6 weeks. Maybe this will work. And it's just that's not real. And so I've struggled with that for a long time. And that was part of this. I was going to peace out. I had this one final tour sort of set up. I'd had a chat with the Dan and Shay guys and sort of said like, hey, I'm going to transition out. I'm going on this final thing with another artist because I got asked to, and then I'm going to hopefully just be in town more. And I worked for, I did a 3-month-long tour with this hip hop artist named Andy Mineo. And one of the coolest experiences, because he is fantastic. He is a Christian hip hop artist, and he was on this big Christian tour. So like, I've done all these different versions of touring now. You know, you start off, and I did like punk van touring, metal van touring, and bus touring. And then, you know, marketing touring and where there's a budget, where there's like whatever. And then working for a country artist on the rise, and then into this Christian world, which is just completely separate from, you know, air quotes, secular music, and has its own.
I know nothing about that world at all.
Same. The reason I got the job was I have a friend who he manages merch accounts, and he was like, we got this dude, Andy. I love him. He's like, I'm calling you first because all of our other friends, I don't know if they could handle going out on a Christian tour. I think they would probably get in fistfights with people. Like, he's like, I know at least you can go and like be respectful to the people, like, and just go like, I have a job. I'm happy to have the job. I'm getting paid fair. Definitely just a different world. They're super nice. It's its own thing. It wasn't even like, I grew up Catholic, you know, which I feel like a lot of the Northeast, that's, you know, but the South is just a version of Christianity, and just interesting to see. I don't really want to preach or speak on all that too much, but it was a different world. But Andy is like, honestly, like one of the most nice, humble, caring dudes. He would talk to anybody. Like he would always take time to talk to all the kids out there. And, I don't know. It was interesting to do something in hip hop that wasn't traditional hip hop. And just like, it was unique. And he's another dude that like I keep tabs on and I check in on every so often. And, his like version of doing a Christian thing is he has his beliefs, he's portraying them. He has fans that like believe in what he's saying and they have their whole thing, but he weighs both sides, and he has a voice on both sides of, you know, it's not just like red Republican Christianity. He's on, you know, it's hip hop too. So he's trying to bring like thought into all of it, which I appreciate. So I've always enjoyed his sort of train of thought and way of thinking, and also portraying himself and his beliefs to his fans. So that was another jump. And then I thought like, all right, I'm going to be done. I'm going to try to like just find something here in town and finally like settle in, bought a house. And then all of a sudden a friend of mine's like, oh my God, we need somebody for like 3 weeks to go do pentatonics. Like, I know you can do the job. It was for a production coordinator, which is basically handling behind the scenes stuff for the crew. And they're like, we know you're saying you quit. You know, like, we know you're saying you quit. Fine. You know, fast forward 2.5 years later, I went all over the world with them too. Like,
stuffing you back in.
Yeah. Which then, you know, another completely different genre, scene type of artist. And A-list, we did arenas, we did amphitheaters as the headliner, and they're an a cappella group. There's 5 people singing. That's it, you know? And so getting to see the behind the scenes and inner workings of that, and it'd be a real budget and A-class accommodations and a lot of travel, and doing a different job and really enjoying it and finding it frustrating at times, but like anything else. But I don't know. I felt like I got pretty good at doing that. And that job is just truly keeping everybody happy. And mine was mostly taking care of the crew. So all the logistics and working with the tour manager to make sure like hotel rooms were had. Everybody had like we had buses and everything's sorted for all the crew, and flights, and just day-to-day catering was sorted for everybody. So like, it's just that my job became like making sure all the comforts were ready so that when everybody shows up, it's like game on and they can start working in a much bigger capacity for an arena where you're bringing in everything for the show and setting it up in hours, and then a show, and then you're tearing, you know, like it's one thing to like bring in some gear onto a stage at the Palladium and play a show versus bringing the stage in with you, you know? So it was cool. I mean,
this is wild. You've worked
Yeah.
in so different, aspects of the music industry and different genres and stuff. It's just mind blowing.
Yeah, it was a thing at 25 where I sort of said, if I'm not going to get to that point, I should get out. And it took longer. Like I thought by 30 I'd be there, and then I took 10 other paths, but it was cool. So to just be able to say that I've done it at the highest level, like the artist that I worked for was the one everybody was coming to see, and we played Madison Square Garden. Like,
so crazy.
It's a short list. It's a growing list always, but to even just get to
back on your own.
Yeah, to get to celebrate that day, which Madison Square Garden isn't even the biggest arena in America, and but it's just such a experience. And hallowed ground. So like we did that. We did the Forum in LA, which is sort of now like its sister arena.
Yeah,
and it'd be the same as doing the Garden in Boston. Like that would be sick. We did. Where did we go?
I think you guys did the DCU Center.
Yeah, they did Worcester. Yeah, they did. And I actually, that was the day I would have gotten to like see the coffee shop and Josh. Like he had just opened, and I had a wedding, so I skipped it, and I was infinitely bummed. It was like a person in my life. I couldn't miss the wedding. And so then there's another thing. Like you don't really get to skip days for stuff like that on tour, but I got myself into enough of a place where everybody covered for me for the day, and they made it through. Like it was weird. We had like a day off, and then the Worcester show, and then a day off. So like, I was gone for 2 days, but I only missed the show. Like, and that never, and like the wedding was in New Jersey, and they were only in Worcester, and then they were coming back to New Jersey. It was like,
that's so sick.
I've never been able to do it. Like everybody, I've always had to just say like, sorry, I'm missing your wedding. Like this is my life. And that's like once in a lifetime of touring where like you happen to make it work. So.
Yeah, I remember you guys did Worcester only because I remember the kiosk thing being on the DCU Center. Like they have like a video screen that shows the events, and I've never heard of that band, which is not something that ever happens at the DCU Center. Like even if it's a band I don't like, it's usually somebody who's big enough where I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Like I know who that is. I remember seeing that name and being like, what the fuck is that?
Trust me, the only reason I knew who they were is because my mom and dad watched the show they were on. They were on one of the singing shows on network television. And so like, that's how they got into people's homes, and they won it. And it's like anything else, like those American Idol deals and the Voice deals and like their deal, it's super contingent. And I mean, they've told this story, so I feel like I can tell it now because they've told it tenfold. They got the deal with the manager and the record contract and like within a month, both were just like, we don't know what to do with this, and just gone. And it was in a time though, right when YouTube was like starting to take off as a platform, and they were able to make that work, and they just started all their own stuff, and they just posted constantly. Like they just stayed in the space. Like they just like went from the TV thing into their own platform and propelled themselves, so they had a fan base of probably young kids. That's like you guys were saying, like the Warped Tour thing that time, like they had a fan base of young kids who understood how to use that YouTube was a platform. And they just, like all my parents' age people didn't follow them along onto YouTube, but all the millions of teenagers did. And so they just garnered this huge following, and they're just known for their sort of take and arrangements of pop songs. Like they do these just insane it's also when Pitch Perfect was in vogue. Like that was all like it all just lined up really nice, where that became, it was a major motion picture. So the idea of all that was people were like cool and understanding of it, and they just were doing it in real life.
That's so sick.
It's wild. It's a thing where people always go like, that can't be all them. And I'm like, that's it. They, in their ears, they get a click track, and honestly, they could do it without it, but you can't have a show with production because that runs like all the cues and the video cues and lighting cues. Like that's what I always say to people. I'm like, they would do the whole show without it. Like they could do the whole show without it, but like there's so many other, when you're coming to see a show at Madison Square Garden, there's so many other elements going on at once. Like they have to have that. So like our whole team can program a show in sync and it's not weird. And like things are going off when they're at the wrong time.
Yeah.
But that's it. And they get
watches.
Yeah. And they get like, so they get a click and a count in, and then they get a pitch. So like whoever's supposed to start the song, they get like a C in their ear, and it's just a pitch. Like it's like, and then they start, like it counts them in, you know? And a lot of that, like most anybody that's that level, like there's a count in, and then before I understood all that, I remember seeing a DVD of Beyonce probably like 10 years ago, right? Where Beyonce's like flying over the arena, like on a, you know, she's connected to rigging, and they're flying her out to the second stage. And and then they're starting the song, and it wasn't like a click, 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 like the drummer. Yeah. It was like Beyonce. It was a song where Beyonce just started singing in the song. And in my head, like I knew how that, I was like, that's probably how that works in my head. And then I've like heard it where it's like, yeah, like that's how a pop show works, because it like there's too many moving parts that it's just a silent, everybody hears the cue. Like in Beyonce's case, it probably says like single ladies, 3, 2, 1, and it just starts, you know. Yep. Like that's how, you know, obviously it's 3, 2, 1 in a actual like hard count, and then it'll start like it'll be like single ladies, 3, 2, 1, and it's and like the band better start playing, you know, like that's sort of it's cool. It's like I love, again, peeling the curtain back. We talked about this earlier. Like I love that. And now I'll transfer. And that's what I was going to say,
because you just provided a perfect little segue, because it's this love of peeling the curtain back that got you to start this podcast, right?
I also love now when podcasts call out the good segues, even the big ones. Like
very meta.
Yeah, because you have to when you find a good segue. So I, like you talked about earlier, Ricky, like I was late to the podcast game. I love them in their, like, people forget in like 2006, Mark Hoppus had a podcast before this evolution to where like you have a phone that does everything, that can pull a podcast down from the sky. Like you had to go to markhoppus.com and download it and drag it onto your iPod and have an iPod.
Show off.
Oh, dude, I'm in the process of moving, which is why I'm in like this one room and not in a normal room that I'm in.
Right now, but
I actually just found my old iPod, and then I found my old phone that I used to use I'd play all the music at the bar I used to work at. Both of them are like destroyed and gross. They still work, but they're just sitting on a shelf, and I just found them the other day. I was like, holy shit, this is great.
It's been, I'll segue back to the podcast in a second, but this has actually been, these are not mine. I have my original one that I got in the 4-year era. So like I'm an OG owner of them, but these are both now flash iPods. So like there's memory cards in these. So like I took the hard drives out. This has been part of my weird quarantine. I got to do something. So this is a 256 gig iPod now. And then the minis, like the OG mini, these were like maxed out at 6 gigs, which, you know, for the time to fit something this small, like with that much, it was revolutionary. This is a 64 gig iPod now.
Nice.
In this small footprint. So that's been my weird quarantine hobby of like, when Skynet falls soon, I just want to like, I can listen to music still. Like it's here. It's physically in my hand on this drive. So like I'm good. You know, like, because when Apple Music and Spotify don't work anymore, which, you know, if we're heading towards The Walking Dead, maybe.
True.
But so to full circle, I kind of fell into the podcast thing late in terms of listening. And when I came to it, because everybody was talking about podcasts like constantly, and I jumped in on, I really like Dax Shepard's podcast, Armchair Expert. And then I did some Joe Rogan. I pick and choose with him because
he kind of annoys me, but like then he'll interview like Tony Hawk, and I'll just see it all over my Twitter feed. I'm like, okay, I'll go download that one, but I can't listen to him all the time. He's too much.
Yeah, I never like subscribed. I just went, oh, Billy Corgan sounds like that would be cool. Like he talked to Chris Stapleton. You know, like there's people where, you know, like I don't ever want to hear. I don't care about the MMA fighters, and I don't, you know, he always talks to doctors and all that, and it's like I want to hear about the stuff that I am interested in.
Yeah.
And so like, that was how I sort of like dipped my toes back into it and found some things that I like. And a friend of mine in California, I have this like group of friends that we love Disney parks and like Disney stuff. Like I'm not as big of like a Disney, like movies. I know them and respect them, but like my bigger Disney dive is like the history of Disney itself, the history of the man. I love all that. Like I could
on Disney, they have like how they built the park and like all that shit. I was watching that. Yeah.
The Imagineering story. That's how much of a nerd I am. That's how I know the title of it. But I like that's going back to like the behind the scenes part. That's my favorite thing. Like I love the parks. I love the parks for what they are, but I could also just sit on a bench and take it all in and go like, how did we get here? And that part's sort of more interesting to me. But I found this podcast through a friend of mine. It's three dudes that they're, for a lack of a better word, they're like comedy writers. They're not famous in like a bigger sense. Like, oh, they like wrote for a Netflix show and they're this huge person, but they've been in LA for same like us, like 13 years in LA. And they all have like done bit part things. One of them worked at Conan for a while. But they met and they found this love over theme parks, and that they all sort of had a similar slant on like they're the same age. So like they saw it all from a same vantage point as kids. And they started this podcast, and it's my favorite thing. Like that's one of the ones, like they could go on for hours and I would listen all the way through because it's funny. And they also do their homework. Like they really do mega research, but then it's always in this like comical slant.
Okay.
So
what's it called?
It's called Podcast The Ride. Like Podcast The Ride, because they also make fun of the fact that Disney always likes these word mouth muncher titles of things now. Like it can't just be Space Mountain. That's it. Space Mountain. They're like, it has to have like subtext, the ride name. And then people are still just going to call it. Yeah. People are still just going to go the Star Wars ride, the Millennium Falcon. They're not going to go Millennium Falcon, smugglers. Like, no, they're just going to call it the Han Solo ride, like whatever. Yeah. But Disney just went into this, like, it has to be this long title, which whatever. So they called the podcast that.
Awesome.
But those dudes were always like, like what? I would love to try this. I would love to try this. I feel like I could. I love talking to people, like, and the thing about people on the road is like they can bullshit a story for an hour. And I was like, that's it. That could be a thing. Like just trying to get somebody in a room to tell their story, but tell some stories, any stories that they're willing to tell. And so I just started. And like we talked a little bit about earlier off mic, like you go like, what do I need to do this? I'll buck gear. And I feel fortunate that in the Dan and Shay era, their aux player Isaac, who plays guitar and keys and sings, he's like a Pro Tools wizard and he's a really big audio guy. And so like he was sort of my technical advisor through all this, and got some gear and just made it as easy plug and play as possible. And one of my oldest friends, I don't know if you guys know, do you guys know Mike Finn? Like did you actually know Mike? Like
yeah, I knew Finn when he worked at SJC Drums for like a second and a half. I knew him through there. I was still interning. And then I haven't seen him in years, but last I saw him, okay. So, I mean, I didn't see him when he was doing like the Dylan Francis and stuff like that. I knew he had gone on to do that, but I forget what he was with, like some random band that the last time I saw him was at the Starbucks near the Palladium in Worcester. We like bumped into each other, and that was years ago.
Right.
But
so he's been a friend for years. And I felt like I could sit with him and we could just go, and then I could see how it could be whittled down. And he has stories. He's just like, he's a Boston kid. He's got stories. He could talk. And that was sort of the experiment. And then it just went from there. And my favorite things so far are guys like you, where you're just like, hey, this has been what I've been sort of hoping somebody would do. And then the friends that like 10 people that know Mike Finn that went, he never told me that story. Like I've known him for 10 years. I didn't know that. And you guys can relate to this. You start doing this thinking like, this could be something. And it's like, no, like Dax Shepard is huge because he's Dax Shepard. Conan's big because he's Conan. Joe Rogan is just on another plane and, you know, just got bought out by Spotify for like $50 million or whatever that deal was.
Over 100.
Yeah. So 100. So like, you got to just do it for fun. You got to do it for you. You guys are doing it for your city, which is sick. Like, and you just start to go like, what do I want to talk to people about? And I've even in this quarantine, I have a few that I've recorded in the can that I've been sort of, I think, you know, depression and anxiety and things affect everybody differently. And also like, I feel like we're all just stuck in the vortex right now. So I've paused, like sort of just taken a break this summer from it, but I have some cool conversations, and I think maybe the way I frame it in the future, it'll be a little different, but it's been a cool exercise in talking with people.
Yeah.
I think it's, oh, sorry, Rick, but I think it's you approach it like capturing those stories, because a lot of those tour life stories, like, again, I went on a couple tours, but I've forgotten more than I remember about even just like our piddly little hardcore bands, the silly shit that we got into, like all that stuff. A lot of it should be recorded. It's all part of a history, and whether or not anybody's passionate enough to go through the effort of putting it on tape is really whether or not it gets remembered.
Yeah. I love, so like my favorite thing about your show, like I was saying before, like I don't know if there's another podcast like that where like somebody talks to the people behind the scenes, but even as a kid, like going to shows, of course I was there to see the bands, but in between the bands, I'm watching like I always remember going to buy merch and just being like, that guy has the coolest fucking job in the world. And then I did it and I was like, this kind of sucks. Like, I mean, it doesn't suck. Like it's great, but it's like,
it's a thankless job.
You get to see it's just like such a different, you know, view of a show that you would, some people, it doesn't even cross their mind. They don't even buy merch, or they just go and buy a t-shirt and they move on and that's it. But for some reason, for me as a kid, I was like, what does that guy do? Or like the bands that I loved, I didn't personally know their merch guy, but I knew who their merch guy was just from, you know, their Facebook or their, you know, as we got older, their Instagram and shit like that. And you see these guys, you're like, oh, that's, you know, whoever that's always on tour with this guy. They become kind of like a mini celebrity in a way. And then you went out of the way to make a podcast, getting those guys, like their story, which is like so rad, because nobody's ever going to do that.
And I think it's the first few were just friends that I know that would come and sit and have a conversation with me. So a lot of them were the behind the scenes crew folks. The intention was to eventually talk to as big of even the artist as possible and let them tell their story. But yeah, so I started with my friends who work in the behind the scenes thing. It's funny the way you just mentioned the merch thing. It's like, they're basically a bartender selling t-shirts. So like but that's why they all have the most personality, because they're the gateway to the band. That's how it's a job that gets swept by a lot, because, oh, merch guy. And you're like, yeah, but I'm the gatekeeper. Yeah.
Especially now, where like, aside from ticket sales, the only thing you're making money on is the merch. You kind of become like the band is still the number one person, but like in terms of what's bringing in revenue, if you have a shit merch guy who has a bad attitude, you're going to lose money 100%.
Yeah, you're a representative of that artist, and you're the closest. You know, bands aren't. Everybody sees their lives on social media now, but you're the closest rep. You're the one. There's a table between you and the person, so you want to be on. And like all those guys you think of always had personalities, because like they're trying to get tipped and they're trying to hustle.
Yeah.
So if they're engaging and funny or dry and sarcastic, but that's their thing, and everybody's beloved them because of it. It just works.
It's part of the band's brand. And like when you had Mimi Naya on, I believe is her name, she was talking about how bands these days, most of their money are coming from the merchandise. So it would make sense for the bands to employ somebody that's going to help promote sales, because that's also how they're getting some of that money.
Yeah, it was interesting, like, to talk. She was one of the first few people where like that came to me through another connection of mine. So I didn't know her coming into that. So like talking to someone, Colton, she's just such a warm person. But yeah, she was saying like it took them a while to get, like, I feel like growing up in hardcore and punk and metal, like that's bread and butter money, but not every musician thinks about that. So she's like, it took us a while to come around and build that and understand how much of a moneymaker and supportive it could be for us versus like, you know, you're a pop punk band. You're like, how many t-shirts did we make for this weekend? Cause that's how we're buying gas, you know, like.
Really though, I mean, at times, like hardcore, back in the hardcore days, it felt like we were a clothing brand that sometimes made music.
But I think that those genres understood that better and capitalized on it. And, you know, that shows for things like a Glamour Kills back in the day.
Or Hot Topic.
Yeah. It's just a different level of understanding versus, you know, like you want to be a pop artist or like you're a folk singer, you know, you're not thinking about that part. You're just thinking about the music. But I don't know. Yeah. Again, going back, like jumping back quickly to like the Warped Tour world, like that's it. That's how everybody makes their money out there. You know, there's a part where some bands start to get paid well, but you know, it's who's got the best merch tent, etc. I want to just real quick jump into, because I know you guys talk about coffee a bunch too. And
right, we take 5. I've been actually holding in my coffee and I need to go set it out.
Edit this. I'll just do this. I'll give you guys some memes.
That's actually one of my favorite things that you do on your show is ask people about their favorite place to get coffee.
That I have like a notes of things that I've stuck with, which I want to get better about not being so abrupt about it and just ask the questions and not be like, this is the part where it's just like kind of segue into them. I every time I listen to a podcast now that I really like, I like try to take away what works and what doesn't and what they're doing better. And again, it's always so hard because you're like, people just love Dax Shepard. I love Dax Shepard.
Yeah, he's incredible.
But he's super thought-provoking. You're like, yo, the guy that made Without a Paddle and was on fucking Parenthood is like this really deep thinker who speaks well. He's an actor, so hopefully he speaks well anyway. But yeah, I think that's the hard part. I kind of love, I just started listening to the dudes from Entourage started a podcast.
Oh, cool.
Like the guy that wrote it, Doug Ellen.
Is he the guy who does, he has like a media company, right? Like
probably, yeah.
Oh my God. One of them is a part of a media company that he started, and their company actually followed us. I forget how I found it. I think one of the guys who plays for the Rangers, Sean Avery, used to be a hockey. He has a podcast, and it falls under that, like that media company signed him or whatever. So I followed them through him, and it's one of the guys from Entourage.
I think it's Kevin Connolly. He was like the redheaded dude, on the show. Yeah,
it is him.
So Connolly is smart and the behind the scenes guy. So like on the podcast, the on mic, the 2 on mic dudes are the guy who played Johnny Drama, Kevin Dillon, and then Doug Ellen who was the guy that originally wrote it and then has written most of it and then wrote the movie. And like he's the one that made all the money from it because he like came up with the concept. So they're on it, but then Kevin pipes it, like he has like a mute button mic where he's the producer of it, but he like talks most of the time too, which is what everybody wants. Like, but they're not like going like, oh yeah, it's the guys from Entourage not talking. We're just talking about whatever. No, they're like going like episode by episode. So like, again, same reason I appreciate you liking my shit is like, I love this because they're not pulling punches. They're like, this was fucking 10 years ago. We can say whatever we want now.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, no one's going to get mad at us anymore. So, but that's cool. Cause like Kevin Dillon is he's not Johnny Drama, but like he just talks and like, and they bullshit. They're New York guys, but like Doug Ellen's very refined and like there's a great lead in with very well spoken because he's a writer. You know, you just go like, oh, motherfucker's a writer. Like, I'm never gonna write that well. I'm never gonna write that great of a lead in. I'm just not. But so coffee, because I saw that I'm mega jealous that like I would love to just walk in there and see Joe Weiss fucking slinging espressos. Because I think that's funny. But yeah, like also, what are they doing their own coffee or do they get it from elsewhere?
They get it from Anchorhead.
They do Anchorhead.
Yeah. Those are our guys. Those are my guys.
Their coffee is so fucking good.
Funny enough, both of those dudes, so Jake and Mike, the guys that own it, that was 2 separate lives for me. So like met Jake working for 4 Year because he had worked for Pierce the Veil and we did some touring with them and then a bunch of other stuff. So Jake is like, same thing, like 10 years of knowing Jake now, and then went and worked for Whitechapel, and Mike was he was doing sound for us because he was also working for the headliner, and they knew each other because they grew up, or they didn't grow up, but they like worked out of the Seattle scene, and they're both like metalhead kids, and they both sort of worked under this dude Josh Penner. And Jake went to school, and I think Mike went to school too, but then they worked at this club in Seattle where they got their real education in doing like live sound from this dude, Josh Penner, who I also know. So it was like this weird triangle of guys. And then they just started this. So like my weird two converting things, and they're both my buds, and now they have this company together. And it really is. And it's the same. So Jake and Mike's approach, and then Nick and Chris and Bayside have a coffee company as well now.
Yeah.
And Jake and Chris are the ones that, Mike does the roasting now, but like Jake and Chris's approach to things, they're so into like this detail, like the super minutia stuff. And that's why the coffee's good, because they're not like, oh, this is fine. Like, yep, we got to get it out. It's like they study so hard. Like Mike does most of the roasting now in terms of Anchorhead, but they just want everything to be spot on. And I appreciate that. So, not only are they buds, but those are two things that I can support. But do you guys have other?
Well, just to kind of dovetail off of that, I thought it was rad that they flew out here to Worcester to make sure that Joe and his staff knew how to brew their coffee and New Tradition the exact way it should be brewed. So not only are you getting, the coffee's roasted across the country, but they're getting it out here in a couple days, and it's getting used up ASAP, and it's getting brewed at the right way. And there's a reason I have to go back once a week. It's fucking delicious. And then they're expanding their offering and working with a local baker to bring in these artisan Pop-Tarts and these other vegan treats that our homies doing. It's just super cool. Yeah,
again, like just Joe brainstorming that idea forever to like see it come to fruition is just super cool to me. But yeah, and those guys, that's part of their thing now. Like, especially with our friend group, Jake and Mike will come and do the whole education. They have deals because once you're in that scene of equipment, they know all those companies. So like they become like a reseller. So like they'll get you a discount because they're going to sell you this. And those espresso machines are like, they cost more than cars, most of them. And so yeah, I have a friend here in Nashville. I'm sure I can say this. So like the drummer for Dan and Shay, that plays for Dan and Shay now, his name's Andrew Cook. He played he's from up there too, Receiving Into Sirens. So Andrew played for
I think a couple times through SJC stuff.
Yeah. So Andrew, and do you know Brian Rushton then also?
I fucking love Brian Rushton.
Yeah. So him and Brian and Andrew have this really amazing bar here in Nashville now. Again, those are dudes like championing them, like so stoked beyond, like same as all the bands and artists I've worked for where I'm always like just rooting, like whether I am getting a paycheck anymore, it doesn't matter. I'm like rooting for them.
Oh yeah.
Same with those two. They opened a bar and it's like everything I would have ever wanted in a bar, they did it. And it's the greatest. It's called the Fox.
Yeah. Friends in Worcester that our plan was it last year? It's either last year or the year before. We were going to fly down to Nashville. They don't know Brian at all, but they're both like huge cocktail guys. So when Brian opened the bar, I told them about it. I'm like, dude, you got to follow this. Like it looks like any bar. If that was in Worcester, I'd be there every single day. Like it would be bad.
And they really did it all themselves. They it's like below this other dive bar called Mickey's, and the guy's literal name is Mickey. He owns like the whole building, and they struck up a good deal with him. It was like his storeroom, and they whitewashed the whole thing and then designed it all from scratch, and it's gone well. It's very small, which is what I love, but like there's only so much ceiling, and I think that's why they're trying to work on other concepts now. Now they've got a coffee thing, and they're doing the same thing sort of that Jake did. They're having that Joe did. They're having Jake come out and like set everything up, and he's going to supply all the coffee. So it's like, I love it. And it's like, that means everything's going to be super on when it comes to coffee. So excited for that. That's like, obviously in the pandemic, everything's just taking longer, but it's in process, and I'm excited to have to be able to just get that coffee whenever I want and not have to order it from all the way across the country. But yeah, for me, that's been like part of my touring life in the last few years, is like finding great places throughout the country. And I just wanted to shout out, like, in weird little cities, like there's a coffee shop called Madcap Coffee, and it's in Michigan, and it's in, like, it's not like it's in Detroit. It's not. And then there's Onyx Coffee, which is in Arkansas. Like there's these places have found these little capsules of like parts of the country that are not like New York City or LA coffee, where neither of those really have an identity, if you ask me. Like they have the bigger names. So like New York has like they have a Stumptown and a Blue Bottle and a La Colombe, which I love all of those. So does like, and LA has that, but like, and then Intelligentsia, but like, and they all have their own little shops, but like these entire like little cities have an identity of coffee because of some of the best in the country. And it's not coming from Seattle either. Again, Anchorhead is, but like, then there's these other wacky.
Yeah. I see. I mean, coffee in itself is truly American, and like the plans for the shit that happened up here in Boston, the Boston Tea Party, all that started in a coffee shop. So like, and believing in like the American small coffee shop, I agree, is like fucking, it's part of what this country is founded on. Plus being able to go around and experience these like people that really care about this one thing and treat it a little differently. That's craft beer in a way. That's its own industry. I always sort of correlate that in our generation. We've taken beer, coffee, and then spirits to this like
whole new level.
Cannabis is next, and I'm so excited. Evan, you are fucking super fascinating. You definitely have made a fan out of me, because I've enjoyed the episodes of the podcast that I've listened to, but I will be listening to more. But for any of our listeners, where can they find you, and how do they find out more?
I am just at Evan Pierri, P as in Peter, Ierri on Instagram. And then the podcast is called Notes from the Road, and it is at Notes from the Road Pod on Instagram. And that's the best place to find it. From there, it links you to everything else. Those are the best places. But seriously, if anybody hears this and has questions, like I check DMs on both ends most of the time, and I don't know, love to keep the conversation going. I appreciate you guys and having me on. It's been cool. Like, I feel like Ricky and I have been talking off and on, and like I said, I'm not as inspired, but I love to talk, so I can come on somebody else's podcast and just get to talk.
Oh yeah, man. I'm noticing 2 hours flew by, and it's been great just sitting here.
Has it been 2 hours already?
Yeah, we're getting there.
We're definitely getting there. But like I said, that's to me what the most powerful podcasts are. Our listeners prefer to listen to a conversation they wouldn't normally get to sit in on. And I feel like, we didn't get to talk too much about, but like, you have lived a very interesting life, and there's a bunch of experiences that most people won't be able to get to experience themselves. So getting to hear this from somebody else is interesting.
Well, I appreciate you guys having me. I would say all you actual Worcester folks, go check out all my rad friends doing cool stuff at New Tradition, the Heartland Barber, and then when Alan Day selling Christmas trees, Big Al selling Christmas trees. Check all that stuff out. I love it.
Crazy shit.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, man.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me.
Cool. So welcome back, guys. That was awesome. Thank you again to Evan, and definitely go listen to his podcast, Notes on the Road. Again, like, it kind of, my way of like loving music is kind of my way of loving sports, where I'm not that I'm more interested, but I kind of am in what it takes to get to that aspect. Like when I play video games, like I don't like necessarily playing the game itself. I like building the team. And when it comes to music, like I love going to shows, but I also really love watching, the little pieces moving all around that make that one little moment happen. So it's cool to get to talk to him and hear about, his journey through the music industry and working with, every single type of music, or in every genre pretty much possible.
Seriously.
Kind of wild.
story is super inspirational because it shows how if somebody has an interest in being in the music industry, but they don't necessarily know how to play an instrument, there are still paths and there are still people that bands need. These acts need these people in places to put the show, to create the experience that is worth the fans' time.
For sure.
It was really cool hearing a lot about that stuff.
Got to talk coffee, which is always a wonderful thing to talk about.
Yeah, mine's empty at the moment, which is sad.
I know, mine is too. Naomi's mom made me coffee. Well, I couldn't join you earlier. I already had one. But no.
I just got
great. We got a new tradition, which is always my favorite thing to talk about.
Yeah. All right. Let's rip into some quick old Stokes and Pokes because that interview was kind of long.
When you hit them with those Stokes, ow! Gotta slap them with those pokes. Oh yeah! Stokes and Pokes.
All right. I will start us off. I am going to poke Grubhub. I like ordering my food once a week. I like to support local restaurants throughout this entire pandemic. It's all super important. What I've heard along the way is that these delivery companies are predatory and they've been hurting the restaurants. And I didn't believe it. I didn't understand how they can be hurting. And then I did both some more research and my own independent research. Ordering Chinese food last night, if I was going through Grubhub, it would have cost me not only a delivery fee, whatever taxes and fees and all that shit. Every item was $5 more expensive through Grubhub than it was ordering direct from the restaurant.
What?
Yeah, and that's shitty. I was just curious how much more they charged, and I had a one-for-one menu-to-menu comparison.
That's wild. I've never used Grubhub or what's the other one? Grubhub, Uber Eats?
DoorDash, Uber Eats.
DoorDash, yeah. So I've never used that. And I definitely never will. I learned a lot about that the last couple of weeks just from friends in the industry and then different, articles and stuff like that have come out kind of explaining how like you were saying, like you still love to like support your favorite restaurants and stuff like at least once a week. But by using Grubhub, it's like almost more of a disservice. And you're also not really guaranteed to be getting your food when it's still hot or edible.
There's all that too. As a consumer, I could see, I know the benefit of Grubhub because then I don't have to chase down individual websites. I can just go see all the food options. All that shit makes sense, right? And yes, delivery needs to be like all these restaurants, it would behoove them to have an online ordering system, a way to have their own dedicated delivery guys androgynously, delivery people. However, I also understand that all that shit costs money, and the restaurants, like to run a restaurant these days, your margins are so fucking razor thin as it is.
Yeah.
Try to diversify your business strategy.
No. Sorry.
That being said,
I'm having a hell of a time trying to keep this thing straight. I'm in a weird position. This is my own doing. Sorry.
We're lounging with Ricky. Long story short, if you really care about supporting the local restaurant, call them directly. They don't have delivery. Get your ass in the car, go down and pick it up. Most places are keeping it very safe. A lot of places you could even just get it delivered right to your window. So you could just drive up and they'll come pop it in your window and you're good to go. But yeah, let's take care of each other and let's not get some nameless or faceless corporation even richer.
Yeah, F Grubhub.
And I am stoked about talk about places I haven't been to in a while. My coffee shop before New Tradition was Acoustic Java, and I still am a fan of their business, and I'm still a fan of their roastery. I am sorry to hear that their Providence location didn't work out. But last week I had, it's
that sucks.
COVID related. However, I kind of had, like, I was talking to somebody last week, and I'm like, oh man, I haven't been to Acoustic Java in a minute. I'm going to go over there. And I went to their roastery room, which is behind Rotman's. And since COVID, they have built a beautiful patio up front, completely changed up the way their interior works. So now it has a nice, clear, defined line of in and out, like one long, clean stream. So if you're concerned about that sort of thing, plenty of place to socially distant, and they're expediting orders. But anybody that was there was windows being covered along this wall, and it made the whole room very dark. And it was a mood, but again, it was still very kind of like claustrophobic. With these windows open, there's so much light coming in. It looks beautiful bouncing off the brick. And then they have art on the walls. And then they have the baristas taking your order. It's such a warm and lovely atmosphere. So big shout out to Dave and Patrick and everybody at Acoustic Java that made a huge improvement to their facility.
I'll have to go. I've still only been that one time. Did I go with you? Wait, no. I saw you.
Probably.
I went with Ed. And you were there, I think?
Yeah.
That's the only time I've ever been to that location.
To be honest, they're about the same amount of distance from me as New Tradition. So.
Oh yeah.
But they have Nitro Cold Brew there, and it's.
Sounds good.
That's what I got.
Oh, yeah.
What you got for us, buddy?
Cool. All right. So my poke is the whole like Trump trying to ban TikTok thing. For a million reasons. Not that I'm like the biggest TikTok fan, but TikTok, in terms of like it being an election year and then you threatening to mess with TikTok, well, I don't know, 3 months before the election, where a majority of their users are between the ages of 16 and 24. I like literally looked up numbers the other day, and excuse me, 50% of their users are under the age of 35. It's not really that smart to be like kind of fucking with the young vote, especially after what TikTok users did to like his rally, and like I understand.
That's why he's pissed off.
No, of course. Yeah, he's an idiot. But so my poke is mostly like, why would you try to ban something like that? It doesn't make any sense. People cite all kinds of different reasons, like they're stealing our information. It's like, bro, every single thing you're a part of, every app you download steals your information. Like, relax, it's fine. But mostly Microsoft is buying the US portion of TikTok, which was announced last week that was in talks. Then Trump said he was going to ban TikTok in the United States. So over the weekend, Microsoft and Trump had a conversation and kind of like smoothed all that out, which I think is pretty fucked up. Now, I'm not surprised because nothing makes any sense anymore, but it's just like, it's just kind of strange. And it's just, we're kind of like inching in towards like, are you going to make TikTok into Facebook, where there's kind of like this blind allegiance, or like they kind of like turn their eyes away from what Trump does in a way. I don't know. It just kind of sucks. So, but then I saw a tweet this morning where somebody questioned, before it was like officially announced that the sale will be finalized middle of September. What about Spotify or Netflix or like another one of those companies throwing their hat in the ring and buying TikTok? And I can't stop thinking about how insane it would be if Spotify bought it, because they're like trying to own the podcast market. Imagine if you owned not only the podcast market, but then you owned TikTok. That'd be wild.
If they can merge with those audio clips too, because that's been the thing on Instagram, where a lot of those Instagram posts can't get shared because they don't have the licensing.
Yeah. So Instagram
already has those licenses.
Yep. Instagram is releasing their version of TikTok like this week. It's called oh man, I forget what it's called. It's not Bytes. Byte is like the other it's like the American version of TikTok. Kind of sucks. Actually, it sucks. What the heck? We do have a Byte account though. Seltzer Time has a Byte account. I forget what they're calling it. It might be like Shades or something. I think it is called Shades. Instagram Shades. It's basically their version of TikTok. It'll be like an in-app thing. That comes out this week. But yeah, so my poke is that. I think it's weird.
Shade.
What?
Shade Room.
Okay, yeah. So
Instagram stories launches TikTok clone Reels.
Reels, that's what it is.
Okay.
Yeah, Reels. I don't know. I'm excited. We'll see what happens with it. But it's still kind of weird. Like, I don't know. Banning an app like that, I think, is kind of strange. We're not China, bro. Or they ban everything. My stoke is hockey all day.
Hockey all day.
Hockey all day. I've been watching it. This is the second game that's been on. I have the volume off to try to not distract myself too much while we're recording. But Yeah, starting on Saturday, there was games from noon to like, I think the last game starts at 10:30. So I've just been watching hockey for now 3 days straight. It's a beautiful thing. It really is. I love it. Especially because I don't think baseball is going to make it through the end of the week. But
What about the dude that just disappeared?
Oh, Cespedes? So, dude, that's like a Mets thing. They ruin everything. He opted out of the season, but he didn't tell anybody until like midway through a game, supposedly. But I think a lot of people are saying that they think the Mets were just trying to embarrass him because the way he opted out. I mean, he didn't opt out the right way either way, but I don't know. It's just kind of typical Mets.
Fair deal.
So that's it. That's all I got. Hockey and social media. What's up?
Yeah, that's awesome. And y'all, if you've made it to this point, you're a superstar because you have killed probably 2 hours worth of your time listening to us babble. And if you like wasting time on podcasts, may we suggest the Alt Weekly podcast hosted by Sean Connolly, an amazing look at local stories and news stuff.
He's the best. I probably won't have a chance today on Monday to listen to that, but tomorrow, Tuesday, it's on my list of stuff to listen to while I get some work done. So
I think the homie Brian O'Donnell's on this week's episode, so I will be listening very soon.
Shout out, Brian.
But yeah, until next week or until next episode, I have been Travis. You can find me on the interwebs at Hunchback Travis.
I have been Ricky. You can find me literally everywhere at DickChuck77 or Seltzer Time Official.
Or on TikTok or on...
Dude, if TikTok survives, so I put a bunch of our like TikToks in our Instagram story this weekend because we got enough. And the DMs that we got were so good. I was like, fuck, man, maybe I should have focused more on TikTok. So if it survives, maybe I will. Maybe we'll be, I don't know. Maybe we'll have our own Worcester TikTok house. We'll be super famous. I don't know, whatever. Probably not, but it could happen.
Who knows?
Could happen.
We're going to be partying.
Always. All right. Bye, guys.